Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, welcome back to the show.
Jim, I'm glad to be back.
John, Royal Nickel traded up to $1.18 on 138 million share volume on Monday, but the next day it sold off sharply. What's driving the volatility?
Well, that was an extremely dramatic move on Monday when it put out a news release that it had encountered coarse gold at level 14. And the implication was that it had extended the strike of the structure that hosts the Father's Day vein from 20 meters to 180 meters. In other words, a substantial increase, and it, based on the level, it implies at least a 25-meter up-dip extent. Now, the controversy about the Beta Hunt project in the Kambalda district of Australia is that they have run into these specimen stone pieces of rock, these golden boulders that are running 10,000 to 20,000 ounces per ton equivalent. And these are the sorts of things, you find them once in a while and you put them in a museum because they're worth more that way. But they're actually in the business of mining. They've been chasing considerably lower grade material, and when they encountered this higher grade system, it confirmed a model that they have been developing about there being a different structural control for the gold mineralization within the Lunan basalts beneath the Kambalda nickel deposits, which sit right at the interface between the komatiite lava flows and the older basalts. And we've talked about this the last couple of weeks, and it's always worth repeating. Historically, such boulders or small zones have been found in association with the nickel deposits, and there has been gold known to be in the basalts, and it has been chased in the past. In fact, it's never been particularly interesting. But in this particular property, the Beta Hunt, there is a fold that has happened. They call it the Kambalda Dome, which has folded the basalts, and within it there is a pyritic shale horizon, not very thick, maybe a couple of meters, which of course has also been folded. And they have a property that sort of runs northwest, southeast, that tracks the axis of this fold, and so it has two flanks. And they've observed that there are at least 4 sort of northwest-southeast shear zones that run through this, which have on the left side dropped it down, on the right side lifted up. And unlike a fault, which actually breaks the rock and moves it, a shear twists it and allows all these smaller little splay veins to evolve. And when fluids come charging through this, it finds a nicely prepared host rock where it can drop itself out. But where this shear intersects with the pyritic shale horizon, that's where there is a particularly receptive chemical sponge. And they've now developed this theory that anywhere where these structures, shear structures, pass through the pyritic shale, there will be these bonanza zones of enrichment, and not just a random one here or two. So what they reported on Monday was that they have 2 dots, and they found coarse gold, visible gold at the level 14 dot. And if you connect these 2 dots and assume that, yes, this is that same specially receptive horizon, we're talking about a blob of rock that's potentially 20 to 30,000 tons when you do the basic arithmetic. And that's a lot more than 100 tons, which itself was going to yield 24,000 ounces from what they've predicted, and that's a substantial amount of revenue. They'll be getting all of that in the next while, and it'll help clean up their balance sheet, which has been in pretty poor shape. But if you take this 20 to 30,000 tons in this particular segment, and obviously it's not going to run 10,000 ounces per ton like your boulder that's half meter by half meter type size. But what if it's down to averages 10 ounce per ton within this special zone? And you're talking about another 200,000 to 300,000 ounces between these two dots. And that's substantial. The mine's already in production. It's permitted. You don't have to wait 3 to 5 years to get permission to mine this. They can just start chasing this. But so that's great. You get a little blast of cash flow. This thing ends up paying for itself and making some extra money. But why have the stock charge from it was around 50 cents to charge as high as $1.18 and trade a third of its fully diluted capitalization? Well, if you believe this model of these structural special zones, they're talking about 5 to 10 kilometers of this sort of zone on their property through those 4 structures that straddle, that cut through the dome. And because it's been folded, you can, in some places, the pyritic shale horizon will be subvertical or near vertical, and that's why you get almost a 25 meter up dip extent for this 2 meter zone. So it's conceivable that if the fluid flow was within this whole area and simply created this high-grade mineralization where this structural intersection between the shear and the pyritic shale occurred, you're talking about 25 to 50 times what they have just announced on Monday. So conceivably, this could be a 500,000 to 1 million ton footprint of potential bonanza zones. So that's what got the market all excited, and it ran up on Monday, and of course it's spectacular. And they were at the Denver Gold Show where they also presented, and at that same Denver Gold Show, Novo Resources presented its Pilbara conglomerate story, and the stock tanked yesterday, was down substantially to 3.25. It's bounced back a bit, and the message from Novo was that, we still have not solved the measurement problem. We're going to have to keep going to bigger and bigger bulk samples, but bigger and bigger bulk samples cost more and more money, and eventually you need to go through a permitting cycle to be allowed to do these big bulk samples. But if you cannot predict where the gold nuggets are going to be concentrated enough to justify these larger scale bulk sampling, you have a chicken and the egg problem. So the audience was pretty unhappy in Denver, but they liked the Royal Nickel story at Beta Hunt. And of course, overnight everybody had second thoughts, and one was, they've just announced a couple dots here. We would like to connect them. The model makes a lot of sense. They've been working on it for a while to develop it, but maybe the stock has gotten ahead of itself. But more importantly, you will not be able to demonstrate that the model is false until you put a fair amount of money into drilling off this system, tracking with these shears where they intersect with the pyritic shales, and doing very close space drilling to find where these zones are, and then driving the adits in to access that. So the company is going to require a financing. And while traders can drive a stock all over the map, anybody who wants to put money into treasury is not going to want to finance at $1.10, $1.20, where it had jumped up to what with almost 500 million shares fully diluted already in existence. So the retreat likely reflects the company getting serious about doing a financing. And this sort of story, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a $50 million financing come in. We were certainly surprised when that sort of financing came into Nova last year, when the Pilbara conglomerate gold story was just getting rolling. In this case, a drill will actually work in figuring out structural geology, will tell you where you are in the system. There will be alteration zones that you can track and start vectoring into the bonanza zones from. So when you put $50 million into the Beta Hunt mine to track down these zones, well, you end up with a sort of a scenario similar to a Gold Corp with its Red Lake project, which of course itself was a a dying, fading mine when Rob McEwen took it on. And eventually they started figuring out where an awful lot of gold piled up, and then became a mechanical job of just chasing it down. We're not quite there yet with this story, but there is evidence that this story is taking shape. It will take a while to kill it, probably at least a year. So the pullback, in my view, reflects the likelihood that there'll be a substantial financing coming in at $50 million, given the market cap. That's less than a 20% dilution. Cleaning out all these old debts from Waterton and Pala and other debts that they now have to put back on the books because they were going to sell this project down the road. This is, I think, the reason for the pullback. The next big milestone for this company, validating this as this is a major serious discovery, will be the announcement of some sort of lawsuit, perhaps by one of the parties that were supposedly going to buy this in the past year. The company has said that there are no plans to sell it, but until we see a lawsuit come out of the woodwork and claim that, well, you actually had a deal to sell it to us or something or other like that, when that happens, that'll be validation that this is a serious story that has substantial upside legs. And of course, in the little back of the napkin example I gave, one can argue, well, you've really exaggerated this and made it look good. But I don't really understand the geometry of this system. The reality could even be much better. And when you have a story like this, where you cannot quantify the upside limit as you normally can with a metal exploration play, that's where you can get a very long-lived, even a bubble in the pricing of the stock. This is what you call S-curve market action. This is like a brand new discovery. It isn't really a deposit that's in production where you can predict way in advance, what it's all going to play out as, and it's all a function of, well, is the grade going to be what they predict, and is the gold price going to be whatever it is that we base the economic decision to develop it on. This is a new discovery play pursuing a reinterpretation of a district in terms of what drove the gold and where did it end up concentrating.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after the break.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. Aurion Resources made a big move last week after reporting drill results from the Risti project in Finland. Has Aurion found the source of its golden boulders?
Well, I think that Mike Basha and Dave Lotan no longer have sweat that they're wiping off their brow after raising $25 million last year. And at fairly good prices. I think some of it was even over $2, and then going in there and starting to drill underneath this field of golden boulders. They're not as spectacular as those at the Beta Hunt mine in Australia, but they are classic high-grade quartz boulders. They're angular. They're concentrated enough that they can't have come too far. But when they drilled last year, they just didn't hit anything in bedrock that resembled the source of these boulders. So the stock had a big sell-off. It was a Discovery Watch stock last year. It was a good stock to accumulate during the bottom fish season, especially since they still had most of that money intact. In fact, even today, they still have $16 million in the treasury. So they returned this year with a 15,000 meter drill program in early July, and they made an announcement in mid-August when the stock had suddenly moved out of its sideways range and jumped over $1, that they had completed about 14 holes and were moving a drill rig onto the property. Now that was about five weeks ago, so it's about time that we finally got some assays. And the big news that came out last week on the 19th was that on the Amarusco main target, they intersected 2.9 meters of 789 grams per ton gold. And this was coarse, visible gold in the core. So obviously when they hit that probably 5-6 weeks ago, they must have known we finally have a meaningful bedrock source for these golden boulders. And that could explain why the stock woke up and has been waiting for the assays to confirm as to, well, what the grade is. Because when you hear this phrase, visible gold, that can mean as little as a speck that you see with a hand lens, and people say it's visible gold. But when you can see it from 5 feet away, that's a different type of story. Now, they also had a second hole, 230 meters east of this first one, which had 5.2 meters of about 12.5 grams per ton gold. So that's telling you that there's an east-west vein system. These are mesothermal systems, that are typical for greenstone belts. That's what you have in the Abitibi belt. And what's nice about them is that they can have substantial vertical extent, high grade, not necessarily very, very thick, but high grade and lots of running room. Now this boulder field is about 1,100 meters by 1,400 meters. They've tested 4 targets. They've, as of this news release, they've drilled 35 holes and reported less than half of them. What's interesting is that the Amarusco main target, they ended up intersecting this structure, which turns out to be dipping to the north, somewhat to the north of the Golden Boulder field, in an area that's covered with talus that doesn't have any golden boulders in it. And obviously this has been sloughed off the hillside and covered this whole area, made it effectively blind, which is why they haven't really been able to find any outcropping gold that they can channel sample and trash and say, oh yeah, here's the vein structure. It goes for 500 meters along strike. It's about 10 meters wide, and just stand back and drill it and see which angle it dips. Well, they had to make this discovery by just systematic grid drilling. They have made this discovery. As I said, they still have $16 million in the treasury. This area to the north that they thought was some sort of lithological boundary is no such thing, so who knows how much more of this system they have. So I would say that the Risti project is now a full-fledged emerging discovery, and congratulations to Aurion management for persisting and drilling these grid holes to find a blind structures that are gold-bearing, that clearly are a source of this large golden boulder field.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. PowerBand Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic Engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with John Kaiser. John, this Friday and Saturday, you'll be presenting at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver. Who will be the star of the show?
Well, I think Scandium Mining International Corp., which is presenting for the first time at the Metals Investor Forum, will be the star. But I'm biased in this regard. In fact, I think this show will be quite a phenomenal show. There's about 8 companies that are either spec value hunter recommendations or bottom fish picks that are at this show, plus a bunch of Discovery Watch companies. And some of them have been starting to make some very interesting news. The companies in my session are Scandium International, Wolfden, which just put out news today that they continue to hit high-grade VMS mineralization at its project in Maine, the Picket Mountain project. And this is a fairly new company we just introduced a month ago. Renaissance Gold is presenting at this show for the first time. This is one of my bottom fish picks, and it's also been a Discovery Watch candidate, or company that we've talked about. In October, which is just around the corner, they will start drilling their Egg Crew project, which they beefed up a bit a few weeks ago when they did a deal with Newmont on some adjacent ground. This is one of those undercover, high-stakes drill plays where they may have to drill as deep as 1,000 meters to hit the lower plate, upper plate boundary, and where the Carlin-type systems are expected to be. S2 Resources, which is Mark Creasy's company, which incidentally also has land in the central Lapland belt of Finland. They are funding this project. Also in my session is Serengeti Resources, which has just completed drilling for its Quanica pre-feasibility study that they hope to release by the middle of next week. The results are still pending, and we're hoping to see the extension of the big hole that they drilled in 2016 that would have grown the deposit deeper. We're hoping to see that pushing this deeper delivered more of this higher grade gold and copper we saw at the end of that hole. And other companies that are big Discovery Watch stories are Nevada Exploration. It's in Gwen Preston's session on Saturday. They announced that they have just mobilized a drill to the South Grass Valley project. This is also a blind gravel-covered system where they have a substantial gold and groundwater anomaly over top of it. They already know that the bedrock's made of lower plates, so they don't have to go through hundreds and hundreds of meters of less prospective upper plate rocks to find the source of this. In this case here, all they need to hit is some gold mineralization in bedrock, showing that, yes, this is a big altered system that has been pumped with gold-enriched fluids, and that stock is off to the races because nobody would have ever drilled this target without the method that they deployed, namely gold and groundwater. Skeena, which just did an important deal with Hochschild, the Peruvian mining company, on its SNP project, farmed out 60%. That takes care of the next $38 million of exploration. Yes, it involves giving up 60% of the property, but Hochschild is a miner of high-grade gold systems, so they are the perfect party to take this to the next level, should they end up that being justified. And there's others such as San Marco, which is going to be at the show. Aben's going to be there. They unfortunately put out not so great news today about the additional holes in the north boundary area, so that stock is off a bit. So poor Jim Pettit's going to be busy answering questions as to what's going to turn this around. And there's a number of other ones that we've talked about that will be there. Great Bear Resources people, I am sure, will be pestering the management at their table about, okay, where's this hinge zone going? Again, high-grade gold is the hot thing these days. Everybody wants to see high-grade, especially a context where you may see more than just one intersection. So I'm pretty excited about this show. I've created a page on my website with my new map feature system where all the companies presenting at the Metals Investor Forum are featured. You can click in there and check out the free corporate profile where you can get basic information and see what the project's all about. And also you can click through to the Share Collective link and see if anybody's gone to the trouble to build an outcome visualization showing, well, if they are successful, what would be the reward that investors could expect down the road. So a big show coming up Friday, Saturday. I'm looking forward to it.
John, sounds exciting. We hope to see you there.
Good. I hope to see you too, Jim.
We've been speaking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.